Thank you, Chair.
Delegations, you're on in, yeah.
I'll get Malcolm's going to come up and talk to elements of the paper. So yeah, look, this is obviously another discussion around the status quo. We're not going to go through and belabour the paper. The paper's taken as read, but obviously important to remember that the background is that you were looking for us to go away and provide you advice on alternative options for considering particularly the notification process for consenting takes of water for water bottling, acknowledging that there is significant community concern around this issue, and that's become heightened, or has heightened off the back of the Havelock North incident and water restrictions that are applying in Hastings at the moment. And just a reminder to Council, obviously, that the broader picture and the longer term discussion around water management in this area is live with the community at the moment through TANK, notwithstanding that that's a process that will take time to come to a conclusion and provide clear policy guidance for staff in terms of managing these sorts of consents in future. So what we thought we'd do, like I say, rather than go through the detail of the paper and the opinion, which I'm sure you've all read in great detail, is Malcolm's just going to run through for you briefly the options that we see before you and the relative risk of each option, and then take some questions.
Thank you. Just quickly, what we've identified as the four options if going forward from here. One is to stay with the status quo, carry on processing consents through the delegations that sit with officers. Risk of that is probably minimal. Second option is for Council to actually instruct and establish a general policy and instruct officers that water bottling applications shall be notified. And on that advice, any water bottling consent that came to officers, we would notify that application. There's greater risk with that in that the basis for that is would be quite a general statement. It wouldn't be actually looking at the application on its merits. There may be predetermination sort of inferred. It may be subject to being contested in terms of whether it should have been notified or not through a judicial review. Third option is that the Council rescind the delegations that sit with officers, at least on this issue of water bottling, so that the notification decision is actually taken back up to a Council level or delegated from Council through to the hearings committee or delegates within that, and they make the decision on a case-by-case basis. So instead of a general approach, it's as an application comes in for water bottling purposes, an individual or a group sit and decide whether that should be notified. It may involve having an independent planner actually prepare a notification report and recommendation, but the decision would be made basically at a Council or Council delegation to hearings committee representatives. The risk of that is probably less than the second one, in that each application has been basically heard on its merits. But if the decision is to notify, there would have to be a basis for that, and you'd be looking to apply special circumstances to justify it. The fourth option is to actually bring it through a plan change, actually a RMA plan change the regional plan, so that it is actually recorded in there that, as a rule, that water bottling activities shall be notified. And if that instruction was sitting in a plan, officers would basically have to take that guidance and notify an application. So those are the four options really that we've put forward. There's a few other things, such as what is the definition of water bottling, if we were to advance any of these, and perhaps there'd need to be a bit of detail teasing out exactly how we picked up on the option that may be preferred and made it work.
So Chair, perhaps just to round that out, add to it, in terms of option 3 in particular, bring the delegations back, we haven't outlined a process, but that's something that could be simply set up with the hearings committee, the chair of the committee, to work through a pragmatic process that obviously met council's statutory obligations and requirements under the RMA around timeframes, because there are timeframes that we would have to meet in terms of consent processing.
Can someone describe for me what special circumstances mean?
In the paper, through Matt Conway, Simpson Gresson, we got legal advice on this, and there is case law. Just refer you to that.
Chair, I'm happy to help because the public probably want to know this as well. Following the council staff paper, there is an opinion which they got from Simpson Grierson, and the critical element, in my view, in that paper is number 35, which is on page 49 of our agenda paper, and I'll read it to you so the public can hear it as well. And this is in relation to public notification being justified as a special circumstance. The fact that the council is aware of interest in and/or opposition to any particular consent application is a relevant consideration, but does not in itself automatically constitute special circumstances. In deciding whether public interest gives rise to special circumstances, the council should consider whether the level of public interest could be categorised as outside the common run of interest shown for similar types of applications. That's the critical piece of advice, in my view, in this opinion.
No. How defendable is that? That's the next question. And I know there's a whole lot of case law here.
Perhaps paragraph 31 is giving some more explanation of special circumstances as being something that's exceptional, abnormal or unusual to the extent that it's outside the common run of things. But it may be less than extraordinary or unique. It would be one which makes notification desirable despite the general provisions excluding the need for notification, and as a result a consent application could be notified due to special circumstances despite the activity being routine or uncontentious or minor. So that's sort of the background to special circumstances. The advice and some of the case law has said that the fact that there are concerns from the community in itself is not necessarily a reason to justify special circumstances, and it would be better that there's other elements that you could also attach to that. So the point we're making is that whenever that decision is exercised, or that discretion is exercised, even if it's brought up to council level, there has to be a reasoning behind the decision, and possibly just saying that there is an issue, that it's been articulated that it is an issue of concern is not enough to justify it being notified. So in terms of law, it would be open to being contested as to whether that was adequate. And that's the risk we're identifying.
So yeah, I guess the critical point that we're making here is that short of the status quo, and look, in all of these there are risks. So even in the status quo, a decision not to notify could be challenged through judicial review. So we're exposed at any point to litigation, and what we're advising you is that there's, if you like, a graduated scale of risk in these approaches, and we can't quantify that for you, and we can't tell you what that might look like because we don't know. As far as we're aware, there's one example of where a challenge to notification has been made, so a review of a decision to notify has been made, but that's far less common than a decision not to notify. Because this is in essence, and I'd stress that it is a legal process that the council would undertake and that staff undertake every day, it's nonetheless subject to all of the natural justice options that the persons involved are entitled to seek recourse and have decisions challenged at any point. So, like I say, a graduated scale, we can't quantify it. There's kind of a judgment there around the level. What we're saying to you is there is a judgment you're going to have to make around the level of risk you're prepared to take recognising the public concern and interest in this.
Thank you, Chair. That's spot on. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, question. Given the clamour and, dare I say it, almost hysteria about water bottling, with letters to the editor, for example, quoting that thousands of litres of water are being extracted daily and sent to China, can someone tell me what volumes are currently, or for the last couple of months, have been going through the Port of Napier? Out.
The short answer. The short answer, councillor, is
Well,
the
if no
short
one can
answer
tell
is that
me,
we don't
I can
know.
tell you. I can tell you.
Okay. Well, we
The
don't know as
answer
staff.
is absolutely none. There is no water being currently exported from Hawke's Bay and hasn't been for the last 2 or 3 months. That's because the Elwood plant is not functioning, and the basic problem is easy to extract, relatively easy to treat, package and transport, but hard to sell and hard to make a dollar out of. So this is an overrated issue. And I know that because we've got a standing item on our transport agenda which looks at transport implications of water bottling, and that is reported at every meeting. That's right, isn't it?
So Steve Young from Port of Napier reported that last Friday.
Yes.
And one of the key reasons is it's winter in China and there's no market for it, or very little, less market for it.
Right, we got a, yeah, you're going to talk to that.
Would you like a staff recommendation on any of those 4 options?
Yes, that would be quite useful.
Sorry, guys.
So we're not making any recommendations.
Sorry, I think staff should give a view.
Well, with all due respect, we deliberately haven't made any recommendations. What we've outlined for you are the risks associated with each step that sit before you, and we're asking you to make the decision around which option you would choose to prefer. So there are risks associated with each one, and where you want to go in terms of exposure to risk relative to the community concern is something that as staff we can't judge and provide you guidance or recommendations on. In terms of the simple practicalities of doing the job, obviously the status quo is the simplest, and probably going to a plan change is the most complex for our work.
Thank you, Ian. And no, we've got Tom and then you, Peter. Or Tom's not quite ready. Are you ready?
No, I want a question.
Yeah. Got a question.
As between 2.2 and 3, the one is the overall, taking an overall policy position, and the next one is allowing it to come to a head in a particular application context. Wouldn't we, in the second of those, wouldn't we wind up, if we thought there was going to be a challenge, we'd wind up in the same legal situation, wouldn't we? We'd have to be defending on whatever basis we thought. So from that standpoint, in my mind, 2 is the better. You just get on 2 point, you just get on with it, you know, just test the policy if you're going to test the policy, and not wait and go through the rigmarole of individual consent
So
applications.
Chair, if I could just respond to that, because I think there is a distinction that Malcolm was trying to highlight, is that a blanket approach without consideration of the individual situation is a higher level, there's a greater exposure than considering each case on its merits.
Can I ask other questions, or?
Yeah, getting, okay. One more question.
Well, I'm going to have to fold 2 into 1 then somehow. In the tank, you make the point that the tank discussion ultimately if there's going to be some rationalization of water use that is based on priority of need or what have you, that's where this will occur. Assuming that's the case, two-part question. A, could we, in the tank process, accelerate that identification of hierarchy? Because in a way, it's independent of everything else going on. It's going to reflect ultimately a community decision as to what is the relative best use or favored use of water in the region. And if we articulated that without waiting for plan change, the whole thing, but if there were a clear sense of where the community is, and that's what the community's raising politically in making all this fuss, is this the best thing we can do with our water? If we did that, would that give us a better grounding than to say we do have a community view on priority use here, and we are reflecting that in a policy statement, a la 2.2, and off we go on that basis, and/or could we, in taking on any applications, simply say that because that ranking is going to occur in tank, that there will be no consensus of a duration longer than. I thought we traversed that at one earlier point, that we could basically say to would-be water bottlers, you know, at best, we're going to give you a short-term, which itself would be
Sure.
disincentivizing.
Yeah.
Is
So-
that possible?
So just taking the two steps, one is could the tank collaborative group kind of work out now a priority order? Well, yes, they could, and I'm not sure that I guess that work's happening at the moment. In terms of the judicial process, the consenting process, that would have no more weight than a general conversation within the community. It only has weight in a consenting process when it's proposed as policy, and then the consents team then have to have regard
I was looking
to
to
it.
reinforce the special circumstance, the thing
Sure.
that Peter first quoted. If you were to provide evidence of a community prioritization.
Possibly. I think the challenge is it won't have gone through its normal legal tests, i.e. it's no more than a conversation between parties, and there's still an element of risk there. So until it's proposed as policy, so on the day that council says, yes, this is what we like and we're consulting the community on it, then it has weight for the team and they would have to deal with that in receiving applications. So that's unfortunately some time away, and probably not helpful if you see this as being an immediate kind of issue you want to grapple with. The second point around the duration, I always stress that consents are not perpetual rights. They're a right to take water or discharge or whatever at a certain point of time. They have a fixed period, they expire, and then they're replaced. They're also reviewable by the council at any time, so there's provisions in the Act to allow us to call them in and say, we've found new information that has us concerned, we want to call the consent in and change the conditions or alter it to reflect sustainable management. And they also have an annual review clause that we can look at them and say there's too much there or not enough. There's also a third step, which is that, and we'll be as staff, certainly in my group, pushing hard in the policy process to see achieved that there's clear guidance in the policy where there is competing use or over-allocation, that there's guidance in the policy around how we address that in consents that are at large and active. And that's happened in the Tukituki catchment where groundwater allocations were set for I think the Waipawa groundwater management zone that ended up being over-allocated, and there was guidance in the policy on how to address or timeframes for addressing the over-allocation, and staff dutifully did that by squeezing everybody down. So we'd be looking for clear guidance in the policy if we get to the point where Hiratonga aquifer allocations, or when we get to the point where allocations are set and we look at them and say there's an allocation issue, that A, there's a prioritisation, what do you see being more important than others, and how do we deal with a clawback or an unwinding of those that are at the bottom of the heap, if you like. But again, that's some time away, so it's not dealing with the immediacy of the issue if the council thinks it's a concern that it wants to address now.
I'm very keen to get one of these resolutions through before I have to go.
Prepared to move 2.2.
I actually wanted to move 2.3, Chair, and I wanted to add another provision 3 to define water bottling.
What's wrong with 2.2?
I think it exposes the council to more risk than 2.3.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I put forward.
Yeah, I know,
motion
I did,
first.
but I had his hand up, but actually, don't know, that's
So-
prejudice. Yeah, we do have a second for 2.2? 2.2. Do we have debate? We have a mover and a seconder, 2.2.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll be very brief. I think it's simple. It's relatively easy to deal with, and it should provide the comfort to the public that they are clamouring for, and that I think is all I need to say.
Seconder?
I could support either of those, but I think 2.2 is more straightforward. It gets to the nub of the issue, and the risk factor, we've been told that all of our legal research has identified one challenge to a public notification that someone objected to. So I think rather than leaving it to be dribbled out bits and piece-wise, I would just go for 2.2.
Any other speakers? Yes, we do. Yes, we have. And you next.
Yeah, Chair, I actually want to move an amendment which would add a 3 defining what water bottling consists of. And I'd like to pick up on number 14 on page 36, where the staff have actually had an attempt to define what water bottling is. So water bottling is defined as, quote, taking and using water for bottling in bottles, bladders or other containers for human consumption where bore water makes up at least 90% of the content of the container. I want to move an amendment adding that as clause 3 to the motion.
Definition.
Yes, because I think it's an integral
So
part
we've
of
got
it.
2.2. Yeah, you're happy with that? With the amendment? Did you get that amendment? Yeah, it's a definition.
Correct.
I think that's very good to add that. Are you happy to
I'm happy with
add that?
Well, if that being the case, Chair, I'd then like to, I'm happy to speak after Councillor Wilson.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's very civil. You're on.
Okay, my personal preference would have been for 2.3 because I think it exposes the council to a lower level of risk because it would actually take each consent and look at it on its merits and make a decision as to whether it should be notified or not, but I will reluctantly support 2.2 if that's the view of other people sitting around this table. The reason for doing this now is because we cannot delay, and yes, we could lock in a plan change that requires notification in every case of a water consent, but that's going to take a considerable period of time. Just yesterday, Tank considered the groundwater modelling, and that information will become public quite soon, I'm guessing, and it might just cause some more of these opportunistic applications for water depending on what the model presents to us. So I think we have to act now and be prepared to handle water bottling consents as they arrive from this point on, and this gives us the opportunity to do exactly that. Looking at the special circumstance under which we would be able to consider public notification or now do public notification as a matter of policy on the basis that there is significant levels of public consent. I note that quite recently a new website was set up which is called www.turnthetap-off.co.nz, and people are asked to go onto that website and indicate their support, addressed to you, Chair, as Chairman of the Regional Council, for requiring notification of water bottling consents, that website has only been active for a few weeks, and already there are well over 500 people who have supported that view. So it's very, very hard to argue in the face of that, that there is not a significant level of public interest and concern about this, and the sooner this council acts to manage it while Tank is completing its deliberations on the hierarchy of priorities for water and so forth, which will not, as Ian's pointed out, come to us as any form of draft policy for another year, the better we're going to be. So I'll support the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I've never met a water bottler. They must be funny-looking fellas while we keep picking on them. But I can't support this because we're making a decision on a use here. If it was all water consents, maybe, but the fact of the matter is we're picking on a piece of the landscape for no apparent reason to me, so I'm against it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I recall bringing a petition to council some time ago on this particular issue, and it was not difficult to get signatures on it. It was asking for public notification of these consents. I'd just like to thank staff for the paper and the discussion we've had. I was in two minds as to whether to support 2.2 or 2.3, and I'm like Councillor Bevan. I'll reluctantly support 2.2 because I thought 2.3 in terms of managing the risk was perhaps a better way to go. I certainly didn't think that going through the process of doing a plan change was necessary given the work the tank's going to be doing. So I'd also reluctantly support 2.2.
Any other speakers? Otherwise, right reply.
Mr. Chairman, it's necessary to do this because you're responding to a public perception, which in fact may be erroneous, but perception becomes reality. And it's a political response, and I have a feeling that if prospective water bottlers know that it's going to be their application is going to be publicly notified, and if they do their due diligence and their business case properly, then there may not be any more applications for water bottling consents.
That would be my thought. Okay, we're going to take the recommendation, and just remember you're voting on 2.2 plus the definition as outlined by Councillor Bevan. So all those in favour? Aye. Against? No. One against. Motion's carried. Thank you. Councillor Bevan, I have to leave. Can you take over as the chair until I return, since Councillor Barker seems to have disappeared? He was going to be missing.